Hello and welcome back to another video. So today we're going to be looking at the Republican Party's nightmare scenario in the 2026 midterms. And what exactly do I mean by their nightmare scenario? Well, this is going to be what's the worst possible scenario for the GOP. What's their absolute floor in the midterms, and what is the best case scenario for the Democrats, essentially. So we're going to be looking at both Senate races and governor races, and I'll talk a little bit about House races at the end. So basically, in the U.S. Senate, Democrats starting off with 34 seats. Republicans are starting off with 31, and I'm going to go ahead and quickly fill out what I presume to be the safe seats. And keep in mind, this would assume that there's going to be a blue wave year, probably at least a national environment of D+6, if not D+8. And keep in mind, in 2018, it was about D+8.5. The Democrats won the generic ballot by. So, a D+8 environment is not totally out of question, or even better than that, but we'll say D+6 or D+8. So I think these would be the safe blue states, and I know New Hampshire is a state that Kamala Harris only won by 3, but again, blue wave scenario. Democrats won the Senate seat here in 2022 in a Biden midterm by 11 points or so. So I think this would be pretty good for them. And then for the Republicans, I think their safe seats would be mainly in the Great Plains region, right about here. And then also a lot of these seats here in the South. And then in Alaska, this is a state that Trump won by 13 points. And then back in 2020, he won by 10. I think this could be like high single digits, so I'll put it as likely red. So that puts the Republicans at 45, Democrats at 44. Now, some of the Republican states, which I think could be more competitive, but I think they're still pretty likely to go towards the Republicans in this scenario, would be a state like Florida, where Trump won by 13 points. And I mean, Florida has really solidified itself as a red state. However, in a blue wave year, I think the Democrats, if they nominate a good candidate, they could bring it to high single digits, maybe 6, 7, 8 points. So likely are in Florida. And keep in mind, this is a special election to fill Marco Rubio's seat. He resigned to become Secretary of State in the Trump administration. Now, looking over to Kansas, Kansas did go to Trump comfortably, but again, this is a dream scenario for the Democrats. If they do something similar to Nebraska, where Nebraska in 2024, the Democrats didn't run a candidate, and independent candidate Dan Osborne came within 7 points of beating Republican Senator Deb Fischer, even though Trump carried the state by close to 20 points. The Democrats, adopt this strategy of running independent candidates that play well in the Great Plains region. I think they could run some really competitive races. So I think Kansas could be a likely R state. And then Nebraska, if Dan Osborne runs again against Pete Ricketts this time, I think he could build on what he did in 2024. He only lost by 7 points. And in a bluer environment, I think he could make the race even closer in a best case scenario for the Democrats. Lean red in Nebraska. Now, going over to Texas, this is a state that in 2020, Trump won by 5.5 points, but then in 2024, he won by 14 points. That was a huge swing towards Republicans. However, in the Senate, it's looking more and more likely that Republican Senator John Cornyn will be primaried by Attorney General Ken Paxton, and Paxton's not a very strong candidate. He's consistently run performed worse than the governor and the lieutenant governor while running for attorney general. And I think if the Democrats have any shot at making this a close race in a blue wave year, Ken Paxton would have to be the nominee. So we're going to assume that Ken Paxton, he beats John Cornyn in the Republican primary, and the Democrats, they would nominate Colin Allred, who outperformed Kamala Harris by 5 points in 2024. I think another good candidate could be State Representative James Tallarico. He seems like a fresh face that could do quite well. But I think if they nominate someone like Beto O'Rourke, who's kind of tarnished his reputation, he could have a harder time. But I think with Allred or Tallarico, this could be a race where Republicans only win by 5 or 6 points. So likely are here in Texas. Now, moving on to Minnesota, we've got an interesting Democratic primary between Lieutenant Governor Peggy Flanagan and Congresswoman Angie Craig. Flanagan is the more progressive candidate, and we've had very limited polling, but she seems to be performing much better against Craig. So we don't know yet who's going to win that primary, obviously. I don't think it's going to make that big of a difference. I think Minnesota, this is a state that voted for Harris by 3, I think would go high single digits for Democrats in this scenario. Now, going on down to Iowa, Joni Ernst is the incumbent Republican senator. We don't know yet if she's going to run for re-election. This is a state that Trump won by 13. Ernst isn't a super strong candidate. She did run 2 points behind Trump in 2020. I think this could be a high single digits race for the Republicans. And then the Democrats are running Rob Sand in Iowa for governor, and I think he's a pretty strong candidate who will keep the race, who can help the Democrats out in the Senate race by with his coattails. And that does get the Republicans to 50 Senate seats, which is enough for control. So yes, even in the Democrats' best case scenario and the nightmare scenario for the Republicans, I don't quite think the Democrats have a pathway to retaking the Senate, but they have a pathway to making a lot of flips that can get them a lot closer to control in the Senate and put them on track to winning Senate control in 2028. Now, going on over to Maine, a poll just came out in Maine that showed that Susan Collins had a 14% approval rating, and among independents, her approval rating was only 8%. Meanwhile, that same poll showed that Governor Janet Mills, the Democrat, she has an approval rating that's 10 points above water. So a net positive of 10 points. I think if Janet Mills runs here against Susan Collins, honestly, I think she could pull it off, even though Susan Collins has a serious history of overperformances. I think in a best case scenario for the Democrats, this could be the year that they finally beat Susan Collins. So I'd put this race as lean Democrat. Now, in Michigan, we have an open seat. Democratic Senator Gary Peters, he is retiring, and we've got a primary with a few candidates. We have Congresswoman Haley Stevens, we've got State Senator Mallory McMorrow, and we have Abdul El Sayed. I think the strongest candidate for the Democrats here would be State Senator Mallory McMorrow. And I think for the Republicans, they could have a few different candidates running. I'm not particularly impressed by anyone. Now, Congressman John James, he is running for governor, and so in the Senate race, I think the Democrats do have an advantage. The Republicans only won, Trump only won Michigan by 1.5 points, but Democrat Alyssa Slotkin won by less than half a point on the same ballot for the U.S. Senate. So down ballot, it is a bit more bluer. And in a blue wave year, I think the Democrats could potentially win this seat by 3 to 4 points at least, if not more. potentially 5, 6, 7 points, but 3 to 4 at least. Now going down to Georgia, we've got Democratic Senator John Ossoff. He pulled off what was thought to be impossible, defeating David Perdue in 2020 and in the 2021 runoffs. And he seems to be in a pretty good position. Now, there is the possibility that the incumbent governor, Brian Kemp, he runs for Senate, but it's not looking like he will. And the Republicans don't really have, outside of Kemp, they don't really have any strong candidates on their bench. I think in a good year for the Democrats, Georgia could go blue by at least a few points, if not more. And relative to the nation, Georgia did move to the left from 2020 to 2024, even though it did swing right overall. So going over to North Carolina, you've got Republican Senator Tom Tillis, and it looks like former Democratic Governor Roy Cooper is going to run for the U.S. Senate. Cooper was a fairly popular governor. He won twice with Trump on the ballot. And Tillis does face a good amount of opposition from his right, so he could be facing a primary challenge, but he has cozied up more towards Trump recently. But I think in a good year for the Democrats, blue wave year, I think North Carolina, this is going to be their first time electing a Democratic senator since 2008. I'm going to put this as tilt blue. And then going on over to Ohio, this is a special election which was triggered by J.D. Vance resigning to become vice president. Now, I don't really like the Democrats' choice of candidates here because it looks like former Senator Sherrod Brown, who has consistently overperformed in his races, it looks like he's probably going to run for governor. So we don't know who's going to run here for the Democrats. Now, if they can get former Congressman Tim Ryan to run, and if the Republicans nominate a historically, weak candidate, this race could get interesting. Now, Trump did win Ohio by about 11 points, so I could see this becoming a lean red race in the best case scenario for the Democrats. Now, if 2026 truly is an apocalyptic blue wave, I could see states like Ohio and even Nebraska potentially going blue, and that would put the Democrats at 51 seats, which would give them Senate control, but it would take a lot to go right for the Democrats in order for that to happen. So realistically, I think in their best case scenario and in the nightmare scenario for the GOP, the Democrats, they flip North Carolina and Maine, bringing them to 51 seats, with Ohio and Nebraska still being close races and Texas, being fairly competitive. And what this allows the Democrats to do is in 2028, they can build on this and they have a much better shot at flipping the Senate 3 years from today. Now, moving on to the governor's races, we've got quite a few races, 36 governors' races, and if we take a look here, a lot of these governors, they are term limited, but some of them aren't. So we're going to look at the safe blue races in this instance. So we're going to have Oregon, California as blue, and there's a good chance that Kamala Harris may in fact run for governor of California, and Gavin Newsom is term limited. So we know that J.B. Pritzker is running for another term in the state of Illinois. And then obviously we've got a lot of these safe blue states in the Northeast. And in Vermont, we don't know yet if Republican Phil Scott is going to run for another term. If he does, and I'm going to assume that he does, this is going to be a safe red race. Same thing here in South Carolina, Tennessee, Alabama, Arkansas, Oklahoma, Nebraska, South Dakota, Wyoming, Idaho. And then now Alaska is interesting because it looks like former Congresswoman, a Democrat, Mary Peltola, she will run for governor. And if she does, I think this is going to be a very interesting race. And for now, I'm going to assume that she will run, and we'll put this at lean red in the best case scenario here for the Democrats. Now, Florida, I think it's too far gone, but it could get closer. So high single digits. Republicans win by a decent amount, but not quite a blowout. Likely are. And then Iowa, again, the Democrats are running State Auditor Rob Sand. He's currently the only statewide elected Democrat in Iowa. He won very narrowly in 2022. He won re-election. Now, if 2026 truly is a blue wave, I think he might be able to pull off something special for the Democrats. But again, this is a state that Trump won by 13 points. It would take a Herculean effort, which is why I'm going to put this at lean R for now. But who knows, maybe Rob Sand can pull it off. Now, going on over to Nevada, the incumbent Republican governor, Joe Lombardo, he seems to be quite popular. And honestly, I don't think the Democrats have too big of a shot at flipping this race. But hope if in their best case scenario, I think they could probably keep it somewhat close. But again, I don't really think they can flip back Nevada in 2026. I'm going to put it at lean R for now. Now, going on over to New Hampshire, Kelly Ayotte, she was just elected as governor in 2024 by a pretty solid margin, high single digits, in a state that Kamala Harris won by 3 points. Now, unseating an incumbent governor is a pretty difficult thing to do, and although she has somewhat tied herself with Trump, I don't think realistically Democrats are going to have a very easy time beating her. So I'm going to put this race at likely R for now, but who knows, maybe things will develop differently. Now, in New York's pretty interesting because in 2022, Kathy Hochul, she only won by about 6 points, and that was a pretty close race. However, with a bluer environment and the fact that Hochul seems to be trying a lot harder to appeal to a wider range of voters, I think she's locked in. She could definitely perform better this time around, not to mention the fact she is facing a primary challenge from her own lieutenant governor, Antonio Delgado. So who knows, he might end up as the nominee, but I think the Democrats in New York, they've realized the Republicans got scarily close in 2022, and it's time to lock in. Best case scenario, I could see them definitely winning New York by over 10 points. Now, in Pennsylvania in 2022, Josh Shapiro was elected over State Senator Doug Mastriano by 15 points. And Doug Mastriano was a pretty horrible candidate because on the same ballot, Dr. Oz lost to John Fetterman by only 5 points. So I don't think Shapiro will have the luxury of facing a terrible candidate like Mastriano again this time around. But I think he is a popular governor, and in a good night for the Democrats, Shapiro could definitely win by over 10 points. Now in Maine, Governor Janet Mills, she is not running for re-election, but this is a state that voted for Kamala Harris comfortably, and I think Democrats should have no problem holding it in 2026, especially in a blue wave year. Now, going on over to Kansas, Laura Kelly, the Democratic governor, she is term limited. So a lot would have to go right for the Democrats to hold Kansas's governorship. Now, best case scenario that I can think of, Attorney General Chris Kobach would be the Republican nominee, and the Democrats would have to find a strong candidate to put up here in Kansas. I'm not quite sure who that could be. Potentially Congresswoman Sharice Davids. But with that being said, the Republicans definitely have a clear advantage here, so I would put this at lean R for their best case scenario for the Democrats. Now, in Texas, Governor Greg Abbott is running for a fourth term. In 2022, he defeated Beto O'Rourke by 11 points, which was a respectable margin. But it wasn't anything super crazy. This was a state that Biden lost by 5.5 points. Harris lost by 14. I think if the Democrats nominate someone like State Representative James Tallarico, this race could be closer. And I would probably say that the Democrats could hold Abbott to high single digits, which would make this race likely R. Now, in Georgia, Governor Brian Kemp, he is term limited, so we don't quite yet know who the Republicans are going to nominate. And if we go ahead and take a look here, their attorney general is running. Marjorie Taylor Greene has expressed interest. Burt Jones has expressed interest. He's their lieutenant governor. I think Greene would be a terrible candidate, to be honest. And then I don't know too much about Jones or Carr, but on the Democratic side, I think Keisha Lance Bottoms could be okay. They really should not nominate Stacey Abrams. She's lost back-to-back. Lucy McBath, I think, would be a strong candidate for the Democrats. If the Democrats nominate McBath and the Republicans nominate Greene, I could definitely see this race as being lean D, and that would be the best case scenario for the Democrats. Right there. Now, going on over to Arizona, Katie Hobbs is running for re-election. She was elected in 2022, narrowly defeating Kari Lake. And Kari Lake was a pretty crazy candidate. I don't know if Katie Hobbs is going to be as lucky this time around. But the Republicans, they've got two main candidates, Andy Biggs and Karen Taylor Robson. Robson did run for governor in 2022. She lost her primary to Lake, and she was seen as a more moderate option compared to Lake. Andy Biggs, he's more of a Freedom Caucus member. But I do think Hobbs, she has that incumbency advantage. Now, remember, Trump did win by 5.5 points in 2020 after Joe Biden narrowly carried the state in 2020, but it swung heavily to the right in 2024. So I think Hobbs, with a blue wave year, Hobbs, I think, has a pretty decent shot. Hobbs has a pretty solid shot at holding her governorship, so I'm going to put this as lean blue. Now, going on over to Wisconsin, the incumbent is Democrat Tony Evers, and as you can see, he is not term limited. We don't know yet if he's going to run for re-election. I'm going to assume that he will. Now, on the Republican side, we do have a few potential candidates, and I'm not particularly impressed by any of them. I think Tom Tiffany might be okay, but with an incumbency advantage, plus the fact that it would be a blue wave year, I think Tony Evers, he could win pretty. I don't want to say he would win by a lot, but I think he could win by a few points because in both of his races, they've been quite close. And I forgot to mark Hawaii as safe blue. That should be safe blue. Now, in Michigan, Gretchen Whitmer, she is term limited, and we've got Secretary of State Jocelyn Benson and Lieutenant Governor Garland Gilchrist running on the Democratic side. I think both would be pretty good candidates. I think Benson might be a bit stronger. And on the Republican side, Congressman John James is running for governor. I think Democrats, even in a typical year, they would have an advantage here. In a blue wave year, most definitely, I think this is a race they could win by a likely margin. In a blue wave year, Benson or Gilchrist would both be pretty formidable candidates. And Whitmer won by double digits in 2022, and in 2018 she won by around, I believe, 7 points or so. The governorship I expect to be blue. Now, going to Ohio, our final state here. Sherrod Brown, former U.S. Senator, lost in 2024 because Trump was on the ballot, but he definitely overperformed Kamala Harris by quite a bit, I think around 7 points. And looks like he'll be running against Republican Vivek Ramaswamy. I don't really think Ramaswamy is going to be that good of a candidate. I think he's going to be pretty mediocre. And Trump did win Ohio by 11 points, but in a blue wave year with a strong Democratic candidate and a weak Republican, I think Brown could narrowly pull it off in a great year for the Democrats. And there you have it, folks. This is the nightmare scenario for the Republicans in 2026. They lose the governorship of Ohio, but they do take back Kansas, and the Democrats keep it close in Alaska, Nevada, and Iowa with shots at winning all of these races, and the Democrats don't lose any of these governorships here in the Midwest, in Wisconsin, Michigan, or Pennsylvania. And then in the Senate, they flip North Carolina and Maine. They hold on to Georgia and Michigan. Then they have close races in Nebraska and Ohio, which they can build on in 2028. So I believe this is the best case scenario for the Democrats in 2026. If you enjoyed this video, please consider liking, subscribing, and turning on post notifications so you don't miss a future video. And please help me get to 100 subscribers, and I'll see you all in the next video. Thank you.